Well, good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Russo, along with our sports department, sports director Matt Beauvais, and sports reporter Dom Tibbetts, coming to you this Tuesday at 12:18 with breaking news from One Bills Drive. You may have seen it by now. The Bills replacing now former head coach Sean McDermott, staying in-house with the announcement today, or at least Matt Beauvais confirming today, Joe Brady as the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills, the current offensive coordinator. Bills staying in-house. We're opening it up today for your reaction, folks out there. We want to hear your thoughts on this decision. But let's begin with the initial reaction from Matt Beauvais. Matt, we just talked at noon, 7 News at noon, and you were a little bit surprised by this decision, by this choice here.
19 minutes later, still very surprised. Did not think that this was going to be the way that this ultimately played out. I mean, they did 9 interviews. They talked to all of these people, and they ended up hiring the first person they talked to, who also happened to be the internal candidate. Listen, I am not going to completely dunk on this and say this is an absolutely terrible decision, because I feel like there are other pieces of this that we still need to know. That said, this is uninspiring to me. This, to me, does not move the meter. This is not an exciting hire. This is not something that the fan base is going to rally around. I know we are asking for comments. I think the vast majority of these comments are going to raise the same concerns that we will likely talk about here. I feel like the offense has been stagnant for a while now. The passing game is far too inconsistent. And the guy in charge of that was Joe Brady. So now he gets promoted. The real big picture here is that I think there are a couple questions we had a week and a half ago when their season ended in Denver. Is this roster good enough? And how are they going to fix the offense? The guy in charge of the roster got a promotion, and the guy in charge of the offense got a promotion. Like, that's crazy, but that's where we're at. So that's just kind of my initial. I mean, we're 50-50 right now. Liam says good hire. Maureen says so stupid move. I can tell you from just the group messages I'm in and the reactions on social media that it's not 50-50. And I'm sure these comments will start to level itself out here a little bit. I'm surprised. I thought they would go outside. I thought they needed a fresh voice, and the fact that they didn't is genuinely surprising to me.
Yeah. Hey, Dom, I want to ask you this, especially since we had the owner, Terry Pegula, sitting up there the day that they announced that they were dismissing head coach Sean McDermott, saying that he stood in that locker room. He saw that the team had hit a playoff wall, right? Joe Brady, part of the coaching staff, the team that put them into that playoff wall as well. Just your initial reaction to this. And again, we're inviting your comments and your feedback, folks, as we stream to you live, both on Facebook and the WKBW app this noon. Dom, just that the playoff wall and Brady being a part of that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up, Jeff, because the way Terry Pegula said it, when the press conference last week, he said, I walked over to Josh Allen's locker. He couldn't even look at me. My quarterback is dejected, looking emotional. Everybody saw how he was on the podium in the post-game press conference. That felt to me like, okay, there's going to be some significant changes, because inside that locker room for 9 years, it just wasn't working with Sean McDermott. And the way things were going with, you can argue with coordinator Bobby Babich and Joe Brady, that it just wasn't ever going to happen in terms of this team getting over the hill with that regime. So to Matt's point, that's why this move also feels uninspiring. It just doesn't move the needle enough for me, because you can equivalate a lot of the problems that the Bills face this year, especially on the offense side of the ball, to the way Joe Brady called it. Now, to his point too as well, I'm not going to go completely slam dunk this, to take his phrase there and go on this move, because we don't know who he brings up as his OC, who the defensive coordinator is. There could be some interesting options there that he wants to bring in. Maybe the things went well with Davis Webb, where he could come in and take over the OC position and leave him away from Denver. I don't know, still to be determined there. But it just, when you made such a significant change to move on from a guy from 9 years of being the head coach of this team, and you stay in-house and you give the guy where there were some problems on that side of the ball a promotion, I just don't see how this is something that inspires confidence in this fan base to believe that the front office really feels like they can get over the hump with Josh Allen, a franchise quarterback that they have. It felt like it needed to be more significant and some more widespread changes. And I just don't know right now if Joe Brady's hire is going to inspire that level of confidence the fan base needs to have, especially coming from that fallout from the end of the season press conference.
The one thing I was thinking when they made the significance of this change, and we all talked about it as well, was the fact that you're going to make this change, you better be right on who you bring in. And the Bills clearly think that Joe Brady is the gentleman that can move this team forward. one part of this too, guys, remember, and I know you touched on this as well. They said Josh Allen was a big part of this process, or at the very least was able to sit down in the meetings and had input on this process. I don't know if we can say he selected the next head coach, but it's clear that at least from hearing the comments and how he was going to be a part of this, it's clear to me, Matt, that Josh Allen's on board with this move.
Yeah, he must be. But at the same time, I feel like it was never a problem that Josh Allen was having these conversations and he was in these meetings. That never bothered me. Some people were like, why does the quarterback have a voice at this table? I think that's nonsense. I think the head coach and quarterback relationship is really important. That said, Josh Allen also said that he supported Ken Dorsey being the offensive coordinator. That said, there were indications that Josh Allen wanted the team to draft Keon Coleman and that was the type of player that they need. So I don't think Josh Allen's voice needs to be the end-all be-all. I think that this needed to be a thorough interview process, and it lasted a week, right? That's not like it's nothing. They talked to a lot of people, but the fact that they went to the first guys, I think that's why so many of these comments are so kind of all the same, uninspiring. Somebody was like, I'm selling my season tickets. This is going to end poorly. That's kind of the general theme here. It just feels like if the offense was great, you could justify this and you could say, we want to keep a great offense and we want to get better on defense. But the offense hasn't been great. James Cook was great. They ran the ball great. Yeah. A lot of that has to do with the offensive line. Aaron Cromer, who's also gone. So that's a notable loss for this team. So they ran the ball well, but the passing offense was just so lackluster and inconsistent. They need to go get better players, and maybe that will take the offense to the next level, and they think Joe Brady is the right guy to do that. I just thought there were other intriguing options out there. Like Brian Daboll, to me, wouldn't have even been a home run. It wouldn't have been. But I know that Josh Allen was the most dynamic version of himself when Brian Daboll was the guy calling the offensive plays. It's tricky because Josh won the MVP last year. So it's like we're not that removed from a historically dominant Josh Allen season with Joe Brady calling the plays. But the thing that I keep going back to is that against the Denver Broncos, they had the ball in overtime with a chance to go win the game, and they weren't able to do it. Against the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, they had the ball with a chance to go take the lead, and they couldn't do it. And the year before that, they had the ball down 3 with a chance to go march down the field and have a game-winning drive, and they couldn't do it. Josh Allen deserves and should carry some of that blame, but it also feels like I was watching the NFC Championship game this week, and Clint Kubiak is the Seahawks offensive coordinator. And watching the game and seeing the reaction online, because a lot of Bills fans wanted Clint Kubiak, there seems to be this general consensus that a great coordinator gives his quarterback some easy buttons, some just plays that you have that are going to work. And it doesn't feel like the Bills have had that in a long time. Mm-hmm. It feels like they do the same thing over and over again. And maybe that's just because the personnel has been so bad. But they run on first down, then it's a bubble screen, and then it's hopefully Josh Allen makes something happen. I just posted on X. The first play of next season has to be a bubble screen just for the bit. It would be so funny. Like, that's a deep cut joke. It would be so funny. But how predictable did it feel like the offense was down the stretch, even in overtime against the Broncos? They have the ball. They get the ball in overtime. First down run, James Cook, 2-yard gain, over and over and over again. And the reason you have to take deep shots down the field to Brandon Cooks is because you were playing from behind the sticks, because it was so unbelievably predictable. I want to also say this. The last time I have been this unsure about a decision from the Bills was when they drafted Josh Allen, and that certainly worked out. So this does not have to mean this will not work. I just think there would have been a lot of other moves you could have made that would have had the fan base more optimistic and more excited.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I just think a lot of us will sit here in hindsight, right? 2020, couple months down the road here through October. And if the Bills offense is clicking, this team is starting to show some signs of, like, you go back to those easy throws. I remember when Daboll was here, and that's why I was kind of a proponent for the Brian Daboll hire, was because it felt like Josh Allen had easy plays. When things were struggling and he wasn't able to get going, he was able to find some success with Daboll, and there were easy dunk plays that kept the chains moving, that kept Josh Allen in a rhythm, kept him slotted, as the figure of speech he likes to use in terms of like when he feels like he's in a groove. You look at that team, though, of what Josh Allen was playing with when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator, way different personnel, way better weapons. You had Emmanuel Sanders, the Stephon Diggs, and an up-and-coming Gabe Davis before all the injuries. So that's why I don't think Joe Brady deserves all the blame in the inconsistencies on the offense last year because of the personnel he was working with. But he also does call the offense in terms of how to get that personnel, get the most out of it. You saw him get the most out of it in the run game. It just felt like the pass game was so lackluster. And I think that's what a lot of people are just going to hold on to. And if I can add one thing on the Josh Allen being a part of this whole process too, I'm like Matt, I have no problem keeping your franchise quarterback along in this process. It's about making Josh Allen happy. All right. Because you can look at a future look at this way down the road when his 6-year extension is up. You want that quarterback. You want your guy, the guy who has given this organization life again and makes him a Super Bowl contender every year. You want him to have a long-term outlook on this organization and say, hey, this is where I want to finish my career. I don't want to be anywhere else but a Buffalo Bill. So it's little puzzle pieces like this, I feel like, that go a long way in giving him some confidence that, yeah, this is the right place. They value my input. I want to be here. But yeah, it shouldn't be the major decision. But I also think that you can't ignore the fact that Joe Brady's relationship with Josh Allen was such a key figure in this, right? I mean, it was him and Daboll and Davis Webb, the 3 guys with the best relationship with Josh Allen that we knew were in this interview process. And I think ultimately that's probably what helped Joe Brady seal the deal with the announcement that he's now the head coach.
Yeah. And he had to have a voice. Josh Allen had to have a voice in this. And we don't know Joe Brady as what he'll bring in as a head coach. We do know him as an offensive coordinator. And both of you point back to that. It'd be interesting to find out. And he must have convinced the Bills at some point that a lot of the direction of the offense and what they were planning to be run heavy, right, in terms of some of those plays along the lines, he must have been able to convince Bean and Pagula that a lot of that was at the direction of Sean McDermott, or at least that's part of it. Maybe he has a different vision for what this offense will look like as the head coach and maybe bring in an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's maybe he's saying, like, you asked me to paint a picture and you didn't even give me a paintbrush. And what exactly am I supposed to do? You can finger paint for so long, but eventually you need a paintbrush if you want to put a masterpiece together. I don't know why that's the first comparison that I thought of, but it was like, listen, his hands were tied. It felt like Joe Brady a lot of times last year was trying to call an offense with one hand tied behind his back because they did not have NFL receivers. The problem here is the guy who didn't give them NFL receivers is now in control, and this is the hierarchy. So you have questions at the top, and now you have questions with the coach that is replacing somebody who at least raised the floor of your team for a long, long time. It feels like the only way that the Sean McDermott decision was going to be really justified is if they went way outside the box and they're like, listen, we think Grant Udinski is an offensive genius and he is going to take this team to another level. But they went with the guy who was already in-house that was running the offense that we already saw that came up short in the biggest moments of the biggest games for the last several years. Like, that's the part of this that is so maddening to me. It's like you had this chance to kind of start over. And you really didn't, unless Joe Brady is like, listen, it was a disaster for the last couple of years and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. It's just that's what it feels like to me. And winning over the fan base does not matter if you have results and success on the field. Immediately.
Yeah.
But, oh my goodness, like, if there's growing pains or if you take a step back, people are going to lose their minds, and they deserve to, rightfully so. Like, This is supposed to be a team that can win the Super Bowl, and instead you've been leapfrogged in the division. You're watching the Patriots and Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins, a team that the Bills didn't have wide receivers this year. Now you're watching 2 of your former wide receivers go and play in the Super Bowl against your most hated division rival. Like, somebody very poignantly in Denver told me, it was a Bills fan, and I was like, are you feeling confident? And he was like, if not now, when? And I keep thinking back to that answer. If not now, when? And now you're trying to run it back with the same guy who wasn't able to get you over the hump and without the other guy that raised your floor so much. So it's just a really confusing move to me.
A lot to play out here, and we're taking your comments here as we kind of break down the breaking news. Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, now on board as the new head coach of the Buffalo Bills, replacing Sean McDermott. Where do they go from here, guys? I mean, there's a lot to digest, right? There's a lot of staff that'll need to be hired offensively, defensively, and I know there's some other parts that that have moved along here. We've been kind of dealing with the breaking news as this came out. You said
Yeah.
Dable went somewhere already?
Tennessee,
in terms
the
of
offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So
My guess is that, I think it's interesting with his staff selections, right? It's like, does anybody who gets retained, how many of the guys on the staff get retained? Because now they're promoting from internal. So there's a world where Bobby Babich is still calling defensive coordinator. I mean, Joe Brady and wide receiver coach Adam Henry have a lot of history together, and they were with each other at LSU. So, there's just an initial thought of just guys who Joe Brady is close with in that aspect. But I also wonder too, whoever this OC is, how much responsibility is that? Does Joe Brady take over play calling still as the head coach, kind of like you saw Sean do at times with the defense? I think those are some of the initial questions and just things that kind of pop into my head a little bit about, what goes forward now with Joe Brady and his staff.
It doesn't have to, like Steven says here, it's a safe move, Beauvais. Also, don't forget Allen was in every meeting, so it's now on Allen, Terry, and Bean to make this work. It is a safe move, but the safer move was keeping Sean McDermott, and there is now an immense there would have been with any candidate, but it just feels like this team needed something new. If your owner is coming to a press conference and saying that you made a decision to fire Sean McDermott because you couldn't get over or around the proverbial playoff wall, then doesn't that kind of make it sound like you need to find somebody who can help you do that? Mm-hmm. One of the guys who was responsible for falling short is the offensive coordinator. To Dom's point, like the offense in the playoffs, like I actually think Joe Brady called some decent games there, and a lot of it was tied to poor execution from Josh Allen and also just not having a very talented roster besides the quarterback, the running back, and the offensive line. So that's part of it too. I just want to know what the vision is, because if the vision is what we've seen, I don't think that's enough. And we won't know that until we get to the press conference. I want to make it clear, like, this could work. I just don't feel super confident about it working. And there were other moves that they could have made that I would have had more confidence in. And I know I'm not alone there. I know a lot of other people feel the exact same way. So that's
right. And then the people that were we need to make a change from Sean McDermott. I know a lot of people were surprised by that move, but for fans that thought that there had to be a change and that McDermott hadn't had couldn't get him over the hump after 9 years, I doubt very highly they were sitting there envisioning respectfully that Joe Brady was going to be the individual that was going to then take over for Sean McDermott and get them to where they, as fans, hope to be. And that's clearly what the Bills anticipate and believe here, Dom, as they look forward. And we don't know. Look, as Matt just said, we don't know. Maybe he can, but they better be right, because you're replacing stability with your offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And away we go. And I'm looking forward to it. Have the Bills confirmed this as of yet? Have the Bills confirmed is there a news conference?
Confirmed.
Is there a news conference coming up?
I don't know the details of that, if that's going to happen like tomorrow or if it's.
But the Bills have pushed out an alert that Joe Brady has been officially named.
Okay, gotcha. So. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing, and I know you are as well, and I'm sure fans are as well, is what that vision is, Dom, right? Or Matt?
Yeah. Dom, go. I don't want to cut you off, Tom. There's a little delay. Do you have something you wanted to add?
No, go ahead. You go. I'll go after you.
I like Joe Brady. I think Joe Brady can be a good offensive coordinator. I don't think he has done enough to earn a promotion. That is where my displeasure with this decision is. It's not that he is not a good offensive young mind who might have some really innovative things that he thinks he can execute with this team. I believe all of that. But it's what has he done to warrant a promotion over other candidates that have as impressive of resumes or more impressive resumes? The fact that he's been here shouldn't be the thing that ultimately helps him get the job. It should help, but it shouldn't be everything. That is my question, is what did he do or what did he say to warrant this added responsibility? And maybe he knocked it out of the park. And then listen, then okay, that makes sense if that's what you ultimately. I want to know what he had to say, and I want to know what his vision is. The problem is with these press conferences and with coach speak and with how guarded everybody is, I don't think we will truly ever know. And that's going to be the thing that's going to, I think, really annoy people for the next several months, because now you're going into a season with so many more questions than you have in a long, long time. The floor for this team is not what it has been. The floor for this Bills team for the last 5 years has been like, listen, they're winning at least 10 or 11 games, and they're going to the playoffs. Now you're going into a year where you're in a division with a team that's going to the Super Bowl. You don't have the steady head coach, and you have this unknown as your new head coach. So there's just a lot of questions that I think need to be answered.
I go back to Joe Brady's, the thing I try to find optimism in why this maybe could work out. I look back at just last year, and you look at kind of the receivers that Beane had to put together and how things started to work out. The Bills won 13 games last year, probably 14 if they don't sit Allen in that Week 18 game against the Patriots, just to rest for that season or the 2 seed there. But I go back to, Matt, when Ken Dorsey was fired and Joe Brady stepped in, and his first game was a pummeling of the Jets. And then the only loss he had the rest of that season until they lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs that year was the Philadelphia overtime game, which was a thriller in which the Bills scored 34 points. The defense just couldn't stop anybody. So it's there. The blueprint of a Joe Brady offense that clicks, gets Josh Allen in the best position to make plays and utilizes the right personnel in the right way. It is there, and we've seen it before. But this season was such a glaring statement about the inconsistencies in this roster that surely needs to take a step up. But I think of the overall point of where Joe Brady and Brandon Beane come into all this. Joe Brady has such a bigger uphill battle to convince everybody that this is the right guy, that I'm the right guy to be the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, because we're not going to probably know that answer until November, December, maybe if the Bills win the division or can clinch another playoff spot, retake the division at some point, or maybe even it takes to the playoffs to get some fans to do that. I feel like Beane has a little bit of an easier road to get the fan base back on his side because he could just kind of pull off a little, I'll call it like a magic act here in this free agency and with using the salary cap and just start building this roster back up and try to get some guys that instill confidence back into this fan base that, they're serious about trying to accomplish the things they need to accomplish with Josh Allen. So hindsight's 2020, but Joe Brady, I just think, has a much bigger battle uphill in this situation. And it's not going to help that he is, I'm seeing all the comments roll in, and it is not nearly as split as maybe I thought it was.
Everybody but Mo Brown
it's tough to get people
happy
to convince that Joe Brady was the right move.
Yeah, everybody but Mo Brown seems to be pretty concerned about this. And listen, it's a valid point. He said Joe Brady had an MVP and a rushing leader. I'd say that's pretty good. Individually, yeah, but it did not lead to success in the playoffs, and that's ultimately what matters the most. That's the entire thing that Terry Pegula just talked about. It was like, okay, yeah, you have the success, but then you ultimately hit a wall. What are you going to do to get over that wall? And instead of finding a new voice or a fresh voice, they went with the guy who has played a hand in this team falling short. And it's not just on Joe Brady. I want to make that unbelievably clear. He does not deserve all of the criticism. He probably doesn't even deserve most of it, but he deserves some of it. And that's why I wonder, what did he do to get promoted?
But doesn't that drill down even more on the fact that they think Sean McDermott was the reason, right? Almost not the coaching staff, but Sean McDermott was the reason that they hit that playoff wall, because by hiring Joe Brady, you're saying you know what I mean? Not that there's not going to be coaching changes and new additions to the staff, but what they're saying is it was Sean McDermott is the reason why we couldn't get over the playoff hump. We think Joe Brady can.
Yeah, that's, to me, the biggest indictment of how they feel about Sean McDermott is this hire, is that they are going to Joe Brady and thinking like, this is going to be what ultimately gets us over the hump.
And that press conference wasn't it too. Now
That's what this is, even more so than the press conference. The press conference is like, they don't believe in Sean McDermott anymore. This is like, we haven't believed in Sean McDermott in a long, long time, and he has been dead weight. And if that's how you feel, you are entitled to that opinion. I don't know how I feel about that. They said in that same press conference that they are looking for a CEO, a leader of men. I don't know what Joe Brady is like behind the scenes. I know what he's like when we're around him. He's very cordial. I think he's a very smart, young offensive mind who has a lot of really good ideas. But I never immediately was like, that dude is a leader, and that dude has got this team rallying behind him. Once again, what we see is very different than what they see.
Yeah.
But I feel that way about Bobby Babich, the defensive coordinator. I'm like, oh, those dudes play for that guy. Like, that guy is inspiring them to get to the next level. I don't know if Joe Brady is that guy, but I guess we're going to find out. The other little layer to this too is I'm very interested to see what he does at offensive coordinator, because if he's taking over as head coach, he's going to continue to call plays. Like offensively, this is going to be his offense. But this would be when I think they could win some people back over if they bring in like a Davis Webb, who a lot of people thought was a candidate for the coaching job. If he came in as your offensive coordinator and kind of worked in lockstep with Joe Brady, I think there could be some really cool, innovative ideas for this offense.
And there's that question there too, Dom. Let me bounce this off you. Someone said, are you more or less excited about this offense than you were 9 days ago, knowing that this will be the way that Joe Brady now wants to do it, knowing what we've seen he can do, some flashes there offensively. And you mentioned the MVP season by Josh Allen last year and the ability to run the ball this year. Are you more or less excited, Dom, about this offense now with this hire than you were under Sean McDermott? I mean, you have Josh Allen, so,
Yeah, which, you listen, and you're always going to have a shot with Josh Allen. Josh Allen can get you out of a lot of pickles and get you out of a lot of alleviate you out of a lot of problems and situations you might run into, and he has done that time and time again. Listen, you live and die with the good and bad from Josh Allen. That's how it is, and that's what you have signed up for if you're the Buffalo Bills, him being your franchise quarterback. It's so, without knowing what changes come to the roster and if there's valuable receiver help that comes in, it is hard for me to feel more excited about this offense, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and believing that the result will be different until I see some drastic changes in the receiver room and gets this offense more like a catalyst with Josh Allen running it. And it's more than just the James Cook run game. I don't know how you can be more excited. It just feels like it's the Office meme of like corporate wants you to find the difference between these two pitchers and there's no difference. Yeah. I don't feel any more excited about this offense. I feel the potential is there because I do believe Joe Brady has called some good games, and I do believe the playoffs were good for him this past, just a couple of weeks ago. And I thought he was great when he came in and replaced Ken Dorsey at the end of the 2023 season. But it's just hindsight 2020. Time will have to just tell the story on this one. And Bean's going to have to do something to construct a roster around him. And to Matt's point again, and I said this earlier too, Davis Webb coming in as the offensive coordinator would absolutely, I think, change how we're talking a little bit about this. If we knew that right now, I think all of a sudden the narrative on it starts to flip a little bit in terms of just people's frustration with Joe Brady.
Listen, this is a comment from X from Team Haircut at 1244. The defense is why we lost to the Broncos. 33 points to a team that can't run with Bo Nix. That is wrong. Like, I will adamantly say the defense is not why the Bills lost to the Broncos. The Bills offense had 5 turnovers in that game, okay? To allow just 33 points to an offense that gave them the ball 5 times back is a really good day for the defense. They gave up in the second half 10 points, and 7 of them came on the touchdown that ultimately took. If you want to say they couldn't get a stop when they needed it the most, absolutely you can make that argument. I would agree with you there. But they did not lose the game because of the defense. They lost the game because the offense, led by Joe Brady and Josh Allen, turned the ball over 5 times in a game. Whenever you turn it over once or twice, you're playing with like a real dangerous game. They did it 5 times in that game, and those 5 turnovers directly led to a ton of the Broncos' points. I mean, think about it. James Cook fumbles when they're about to take a big lead. They go down the field and they score a touchdown, okay?
14-3. It's 14-3 there. Yeah.
If James Cook doesn't fumble that ball, you know what I mean? It's like it's either a 10-3 or a 14-3 game at that point.
Yeah. Yep.
The Bills forced their own turnover on a Deion Walker interception that we have somehow never talked about because the game was so much stuff has happened since the game. Josh throws an interception a couple plays later. Broncos go down the field. It's just like it's the defense is not why they lost the Broncos game. The defense is why they have fallen short at times, but it wasn't this year. It was the 5 turnovers on offense.
Do you guys think that now we have Brady as the head coach? He's going to bring in his staff. Is Babich on the is he on the table here? I mean,
dude, I'm just
saying. I mean,
I know.
I mean, we don't have any indication that it will be or won't be, right? But is he on the table?
No. You know what they should do? There's one guy out there on the market right now available who I think would be a really good defensive coordinator. I think he's always kind of elevated his defenses, but he hasn't always had the best players. His name is Sean McDermott. They should call him. That's who they should call to run this defense.
Right.
So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they just run it back with Babich. I think that you would need to go and get like a very veteran, experienced defensive coordinator here.
There's a Raheem Morris out there on the market, something like that, right?
Here's what you can do. You can go and get, because Joe Brady will take the reins here and call plays offensively, the offensive coordinator should be a young, innovative person who I think Brady can work with. The defensive coordinator needs to be very much the one calling the shots on that side of the ball, kind of like the Bills have done in years past with like when Sean got here, he hired Leslie Frazier to be his like established voice of reason defensively. So they need a person like that. They need somebody who they know can run a defense without really much of the head coach's input.
There's also, you got to remember too, the amount of interviews the Bills had, right? 9 in total. And there's a lot of offensive guys in there. I'm just thinking offensive coordinator wise, you're not expecting Grant Udinski to make a lateral move and just leave Jacksonville to come to Buffalo. Davis Webb is obviously a big popular name. I might butcher his last name here because I'm still not 100% up, but Nate Scheelhaus, yes, from Los Angeles, I think would also be something where, to your point, a young, innovative guy who's been in a very good, comes from the McVay coaching tree, so it's already lucrative, inspires a little bit of confidence, comes in, kind of shakes things up a little bit there, brings some fresh ideas, some different perspective for Joe Brady to look at as he now has to juggle, because Matt, too, we all know this, guys. Jeff, you covered this team for years, too. It's Joe Brady has a lot more responsibilities are going to be on his shoulder now. So if there's somebody who could also be that voice of reason, or just somebody who is able to bounce ideas off of him and give him a fresh perspective on things offensively, I think that will go a long way.
Yeah. I mean, I keep going back to, I know I keep saying this over and over. I just want to know how much of the offense was what Joe Brady thought the offense needed to look like, and how much was he was running the offense that Sean McDermott wanted him to run. And I will say that there is evidence of that possible scenario, even going back to Brian Daboll. And it felt like that's why things fizzled out there, because Brian Daboll wanted to throw the ball all over the place. He was like, we have Josh Allen, we have this freak, we don't need to run the ball. Sean McDermott was like, we need to establish the run, especially in the playoffs. And that led to some friction there. And that's one of the reasons why for a long time it was kind of speculated that the relationship was not outstanding. I know for a fact that even after Brian Daboll left, it got better. Like, I think he had a new appreciation for what Sean was doing. And I think Sean McDermott realized that Brian Daboll was just trying to do whatever was best for the Bills. If the same thing happened again behind closed doors, maybe that's what Brady is leaning into. Maybe Brady is like, let me cook. Like, I have done what I have been able to do with Sean McDermott and with the pieces we have had. Go get me a real wide receiver, and I think I could take this team to the next level. So that's got to be, if you're a glass half full person, that's what you are hoping for. Yeah. That is what you were trying to be optimistic about. Just the evidence shows us otherwise, because the offense had been so stagnant and so inconsistent.
He must have convinced Bean and Pagula that this, and Bean would know this well, that this offense was heavy. Sean McDermott towards what he wanted. Here's my vision. I need 6 wide receivers, and I need, we need to bolster a couple spots in the defensive side, and let's go. I mean, he convinced him that he's the guy to take it, and he must have a vision for it, and that's what we're waiting to hear. Do you anticipate it'll be vastly different though than what we saw? Offensively, it needs to be, right? Or no?
I feel like that all depends on unless you're just going to run it back with similar wide receivers, right? If you come out and get a proven wide receiver one, or just at least just put a couple more pieces around that, maybe then there's sign for change there too. But until I see that, it's hard for me to sit here and believe it too. The other interesting note we haven't even talked about, guys, is you go back to that press conference with Terry Pagula and Sean McDermott at the end of the season, all that Keon stuff. I mean, it was a coaching staff decision.
And then they brought in the guy.
And then they brought in the guy who was likely a big proponent on making that decision. That's the other thing that just popped in my head. We haven't even talked about this Keon stuff. The owner is openly being like, it was a coaching staff decision. Brandon never wanted him. Well, that guy got a promotion. The guy who was a part of wanting Keon Coleman to come here, also got a promotion as well. So add that to the wrinkle of things there too. That's why I don't know if it could, Jeff, it could be different because Keon Coleman might not be on the team next year.
And what was that conversation like with Brady in the interview? You made these comments about Coleman. And Brady's like, I wasn't, I wasn't involved
Yeah.
in that. I mean, that is it's going to be fascinating. And the general reaction and what we're seeing,
yeah.
they better have it right.
They better have it right, and
Yep.
they better knock out this offseason, because if they do the same thing over again and just run it back with like uninspiring wide receivers, and they just kind of fill the gaps on their offensive line, because like probably they're going to lose Connor McGovern, they're going to lose David Edwards. Those are two starters. Those are two notable pieces. They'll probably just fill those spots in with people they already have on their roster, but they better go out and add multiple weapons for this team, because listen, Dawson Knox is scheduled to make a ton of money. I have no idea what's going to happen with him. Dalton Kincaid, when he plays, is very good. The problem is he has not been available very often. Yeah. So they need to figure out a contingency plan there. And the wide receivers, I mean, they were starting guys in the playoffs that weren't on their team in late November. Like, that can't happen again. Injuries are a part of the story, but they can't be the excuse for how flawed this roster was when it was put together. Everybody eats was a fun, catchy thing to say for a while. Last year, everybody was starving. They need to go find a legitimate wide receiver who teams need to game plan for.
I would argue everybody was famished. If you're not Josh Allen or James Cook, you were famished, honestly. It was worse than starving.
Their last two notable wide receiver additions in free agency have been Curtis Samuel and Josh Palmer. Last year, neither of them caught a touchdown. Think about that. It's crazy.
Wow. It's got to be a focus. That has to be a focus, and it'll be up to Joe Brady to try and kind of, navigate that ship now. Look, end of the day, people are surprised by this. They may or may not like the decision to stay in-house with Joe Brady. But this is the way the Bills are moving forward. Now, we don't know how he'll do as a head coach, but at the very least, we can say this. He did have other interviews. He did have other interests, right, for head coach, positions, for possibilities out there. So the league in some capacity see some of those skills, some of those, mindsets in front of them. So Joe Brady, an individual that, a couple teams kicked the tires on him this year. He's the new head coach of the Buffalo Bills. And this is something we've been covering live for you since over the last hour. And here we're taking your comments as well. But I know we got to go get some reaction and, get this ready for the shows throughout the day. You guys want to finish with any final thoughts on this? Let's start with you, Matt. Final thoughts, Joe Brady, the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills. We'll get in some final comments from you folks as well, if you'd like to leave them there.
My final thought is that this is not a move that will move the meter for any of the fan base or for myself. I thought that there were more exciting options out there. There were more intriguing options out there as well. That does not mean that this won't work. I just don't feel super confident that it will. And until I'm proven wrong, which could very likely happen, I am going to have my reservations about this. There were other people that they could have hired that I would have felt like, yeah, that makes sense. I understand why they're doing that. I don't understand this move yet. I don't even know if I will after hearing from Joe Brady and Brandon Beane again. I don't know if I'll understand it until well into next season. But this team does not have the luxury. I don't want to say the luxury, because the pressure and the standard is a good thing. The fact that we're talking about a team that is truly trying to win a championship is a good thing. But when you have those aspirations, you do not have the runway to screw up or to take some time to ease into this thing. So I feel like I'm going to have questions until the minute they play football next year. And even at that point, I won't know for sure until we have an entire season and a bigger sample size of him as a head coach.
Your thoughts, Dom. Final thoughts here as we dive into the rest of this today.
I'm just going to have to tell Bills Mafia that patience is a virtue, because we can sit here and debate all day long about whether or not we agree with this decision, why Joe Brady fits or why Joe Brady doesn't fit as a head coach. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take his staff to be assembled. It's going to take additions to this roster for things to either work in one direction or the other. We don't know. This could ultimately backfire for the Buffalo Bills, but to Matt's point, this could also make us eat our words. We could be going back here at the end of January, fast forward 8-9 months from now, if the Bills are in the race for the division, looking at a 1 seed, maybe clinching the division back from your rival, the Patriots, and going, okay, yeah, you know what? Maybe we did freak out a little bit in January, right? Like maybe things were a little bit better than we thought it was. But you have to sit back, and we're just going to have to wait on it, because there just won't be any clear answers in the short term. That's not what a head coach is able to do until you're starting to play games here. I also think that they need to, and I just need, with all capital letters, go get an offensive coordinator that is not in that system. I don't want to see Adam Henry, the wide receiver coach. Somebody had put a comment about Ronald Curry, the quarterback coach. Ronald Curry is one of the most accomplished quarterbacks that has come out of, college ball and high school ball. For a little bit of backstory, those who don't know about him. But I am so uninspired by them making lateral moves of Joe Brady going from a quarterback coach to an offensive coordinator, and then now the head coach, the same way Ken Dorsey went from a quarterback coach to an offensive coach. I don't want to see any more lateral or internal moves from this organization. I want them to go out and go get somebody who brings fresh ideas and a fresh perspective to One Bills Drive. That is how things can start to be alleviated and how that patience starts to pay off.
At the end of the day, the Bills did not think Sean McDermott was the person that get him over the hump. You heard Terry Pegula say he was sitting in that locker room after the game against Denver, the loss against Denver, and he said, "You just felt like we hit that playoff wall." Well, they now believe that a person that was part of that coaching staff with Sean McDermott is the person that can take them to the next step. Joe Brady, now your new head coach of the Buffalo Bills. The Bills confirming that today, something we've been following for you throughout the last 40 minutes. We thank you for your comments. We're going to have continued coverage of this throughout the evening on 7 News at 5 and 5:30 and 6 o'clock and throughout the evening. Joe Brady, the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills. We thank you for joining us here. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Dom.
No, Joe.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for steering the ship. It's like you've covered a coach search before.
Yeah, just a few.
This is foreign to us.
Yeah,
I'm also,
right.
I don't want to seem like I'm being rude if I'm looking away. I'm just trying to do like 14 things as we all are right now. But thank you for steering the ship here. I appreciate that.
Jeff,
Yeah.
I think you might have a future in this. Consider
I
I
appreciate
you might be good at this.
Well, I've covered some coaching searches, and it did not come from a place of stability of being in the playoffs at all. I covered the drought. So
yeah, how many of those went well, Jeff? How many of those went well?
During my tenure, none of them. None of them. So we'll see what happens with Joe Brady. Matt, Dom, thank you, viewers, and for folks tuning in, we'll get back with you at 7 News at 5, 5:36, and throughout the evening on WKBW.com. Thank you, guys. Thanks.